Hey, it's Joey from the Joey and Jeremy podcast. I want to thank you guys for tuning in and watching us. We ask that you like, subscribe, continue to share the message. The feedback has been overwhelming. We just want to really thank you guys for supporting us. You're going to see that we've gone through a couple of iterations as far as a name, and the story is going to kind of unfold. A couple times we landed on a name, and the name ended up being used by a different podcast, but it just pushed us to be true to ourselves with the Joey and Jeremy podcast. Again, thanks for tuning in. Like, share, subscribe so that more people can get the message out. Have a great day. So we're going to jump in today, and first off, we actually have a name.
Yeah.
The name is, look at that.
We got a shirt already.
Yeah, look at that. Yeah, we're official.
We got a shirt.
Power Flow.
Power Flow.
Power Flow.
How did we come up with Power Flow? You want to tell it? You want me to tell it?
You can go ahead and tell it, yeah.
So, Power Flow is something that was organic. It kind of came together similar to The Fast Way Out. So, when we titled The Fast Way Out, it was like, what do you think? What do you think? We let some stuff. We sent some text messages. We let it marinate a little bit. And we kind of did the same thing this time around. So, we started off with some options that we didn't land anywhere close to where we started, but right. We were just talking about different options, and then Gina mentioned along the way, hey, maybe you ought to consider putting power in the title. So
who's Gina?
Gina's my wife. I mentioned her in episode 1.
Yeah.
My other better half, all of that. So yep, so she mentioned considering putting power in the title, and the reason is because I am really big into power books. So I've been trying to read a number of books, and they all have power in the title. So power versus force, the power of positive thinking, the power of now, the power of awareness. So I've just been reading a bunch of different books, and she knows I've been doing that. And so it's been pretty meaningful for me. And she's like, let's, consider that. And so I mentioned it to Joey, and we had a couple power options, and we kind of landed on, not kind of, but we did land on Power Flow. So it's the Power Flow podcast.
That's
officially.
Right. Officially. With the t-shirts.
What's today? What's today's date?
Today is the November the 28th. 28th. Yeah, it's the 28th. I got money.
29th.
You sure?
29th. 11/29.
I lost money. Yeah, so the 29th.
Yep.
So yes, it's Power Flow, empowered, inspired, and unscripted.
So you added that. So you talk about why those components, principles, whatever we want to call them.
Empowered. We've been empowered by the Holy Spirit as believers in Christ. Inspired. This kind of goes back to the root of the podcast altogether. Having these inspiring conversations. Picking each other up when we're down, and I mean even when we're not down, just having a conversation and coming away feeling better than we did before the conversation. That's where the inspired came from. And unscripted is because basically, we don't have a laid out script. Like, we're not reading off a teleprompter. Right. We have a general direction that we want to, go take this thing into, just so we can make sure we're not just free will, willy-nilly, throwing things around, throwing things on the walls here with sticks. Just to give us a general direction. And also from unscripted, when we actually show the logo, it's in red letters, because in the Bible, of course, in scriptures, Jesus' words are red, man. So we here now.
We here.
We here.
Right here in the garage once again. Yeah. So we shifted around a little bit. No more bar stools. So still in the same spot, but this garage is where I spend a lot of my time. You talked about the origin of the podcast a little bit. I know last time around I gave my version of how this kind of came to be. So what's your take, and why podcasts? What are you trying to accomplish? What was your inspiration? So say more about your side of that, your perspective.
So yes, going back to maybe 2015, 2016, I got introduced to podcast. The first one I really got into, listening to every new episode, was the Rich Roll podcast. He's a vegan. His health story was, he was a lawyer. He was like Ivy League educated, super smart guy, but just his life was just going down the wrong path. He had gotten super unhealthy, really heavy, and he was just like, this isn't the way my life's supposed to be going. And so I was like almost 40 years old, he went vegan and he started running. This is kind of what got me into running. And I want to say he ran his first marathon at like age 42 or something like that. But he began the Rich Road podcast, and his podcast was long form conversation. Like he'd bring a guest on, and they would talk for 2.5 hours.
Wow.
And I know that's not everybody's best. That's not everybody's idea of entertainment. But if you listen to the conversation, you grew. You learned so much, you gleaned so much from it. And getting into that, like I said, I watched every new episode. Like it got to the point where I was going through them in order, like trying to watch every single episode. Wow. And to this day, I'll jump on and kind of get a snippet here and there from Rich Roll. Okay. Like I said, Ivy League, super smart guy, man. But he just brings on these guests, and after you listen to them talk, you feel empowered.
Okay.
And that's what got me hooked in the podcast. I actually looked at starting the podcast years ago.
What year?
Right around the same time frame.
Okay. 16.
Yeah, because I was like, if this is having this impact on me, how can I turn around and pay it forward, so to speak?
Sure.
So I looked into some different, like getting equipment and things like that. I actually started blogging. And I need to pull those up just so I can kind of look back and see where I was at, But actually, I never published the blogs, but I had written out some articles just to kind of get a steady flow. So once I started releasing them, I could release them on the time, timely, consistently.
Okay.
But yeah, that's what got me into podcasts.
Okay.
And this form of podcast, because there's different types. There's monologue podcasts where people it's just one person, and they're just giving you information, but it's hard to get feedback when you're that one person giving information. Like afterwards, it's like, did I give too much information? Did I not do enough? Like you got to fill in all the gaps as far as the quiet time, But like with this, I can bat the ball over to you and get some feedback, and then you can bat it right back over to me. So it's just, this is how people communicate.
Yeah.
You don't go in a restaurant by yourself and have a monologue. Yeah. Not typically.
No,
not out loud.
Not normal.
Not out loud.
Some people do.
Yeah. We put those people on medication.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what got me really into podcasts.
Who are you trying to reach? Not you, but who are we trying to reach? Who's the audience? Anybody?
I believe anybody who wants better. Like anybody who realizes they have purpose. Because the truth is the truth, and the truth blesses everybody.
Yeah.
It's not a certain demographic. Oh, the truth is for them. Jews versus Gentiles. We ain't messing with those guys over there.
You hit some heavy stuff, man.
We ain't messing with those guys over there. So
right.
But yeah, it's for anybody and everybody willing to listen.
Okay.
To our 2-hour-long podcast. Nah, you're not gonna talk 2 hours.
Not gonna be 2 hours.
Not gonna talk 2 hours. I don't have that many words.
Right.
So going over the name. You want to jump into self-care?
Sure. Yeah.
All right. So what's your framework for self-care when you're talking about mind, body, spirit?
We talked about self-care last time, and I've been thinking about that a whole lot because I think it's super important. Personal self-care, being your best self so you can be your best version for other people. So you kind of owe it to yourself, you owe it to others to be your best self. As I thought more about it, I was just trying to think about what does that look like in practice. And to me, I think there's really a few different components you could consider. We always hear about mind, body, spirit, and I think that's probably a good way to break down, if we were to think about different pieces of self-care. I think all very important, all super critical, but I think it's worth separating them as you think about practicing self-care or self-care in application. So for me, if I think about mind, I have been reading a whole lot, probably a little bit too much, but that's kind of how I spend my spare time. I'm trying to get through these books. So I'm on the final book, and I will mention, I just happen to have this. This is the final one of the 7 books that I'm trying to get through. And this one's The Power of Intention by Dr. Wayne Dyer. Very common book. I think you've read it as well.
I haven't read that book, but I'm familiar with Wayne Dyer.
Okay.
Actually, he doesn't have a podcast, but he has like this morning video that he used to do.
Okay.
A little video series. So
it's funny. 6 of the 7 authors are deceased. So.
Oh wow.
So the only person that's still with us in body is Eckhart, who is the author of The Power of Now. So anyway, that's the mind piece of it. I do a lot of reading. I'm out of school now. I think we talked about that last time. So I'm just trying to keep that discipline, because I know once I go back to school, it's going to be heavy, dense reading. So trying to keep that piece of it. So that's the mind. Body is important as well. So exercise. I have not had a chance to exercise, and I have been dragging a lot because of it. It's probably been a week and a half, 2 weeks. We had Thanksgiving last week, so I got way off track. And I can tell. So that's something I have slipped on, and I need to do a better job with as well. Spirit is the other piece of it. So just trying to keep spiritual discipline, morning prayer, reading, the Bible app, or whatever that spiritual discipline is. I'm trying to do that as well. So those 3 pieces, I think, are the different tenets, I would say, of self-care. And so it's a continuous work in progress. I fall down a little bit, but I think I'm doing pretty good, and it's a work in progress. So it's something I'll continue to try to do a better job with. But again, just trying to be my best self, so I can be the best person for other people, especially my family, my coworkers. They need me to be my best self. So that's a long answer to a short question.
No, man, it's a short question, but it's a big question. It covers a lot.
Yeah. What about you? So that's self-care to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about you?
Just to piggyback on what you're saying, how we all fall off the wagon, so to speak. And the question is, like, how long do you stay off the wagon? Because the longer you stay off, the harder it is to get back into the routine of it.
Yeah.
So I got a little bit of a different answer for the mind. I am usually like a voracious reader. Like, I will go through some books. I really will. Lately, and I actually told you this, I was like, man, I'm slacking on reading, man. I'm just reading the Bible.
And I was like, you do realize that's like the most important book ever.
Exactly. But I want to say, with mind, intentional conversations. I truly believe you can learn something from everybody. And just being able to gain perspective that you didn't have. Conversation is an extremely powerful medium. Let's go deep.
Okay.
All right, let's go deep. A little deep. We ain't gonna go real deep.
All right.
I'm gonna stick my toe in. So, from personal experience, when you're going through something very deep, something heavy, I've been set free through conversation. In the past, I've relied on my intellect and my knowledge, my know-how. Like, I'm smart, I can get it done, I'll figure it out. And I'll just jump in the book, I'll find the answer in the book, and that's what we're going to do. And that will sometimes lead you into a ditch. You know, sometimes you need, is a reason why you have elders who are wise counsel.
Yeah.
You know, to be able to go speak to somebody who's, even if they haven't been through the exact same thing you're dealing with, they may have perspective from a situation that's similar.
Yeah.
And you may actually find somebody who's been through exactly what you've been through, but now they're on the other side. And they can look back and be like, okay, well, here are a couple of, not traps, but here are a couple of things you want to avoid while you dealing. You know, try X, Y, and Z, stay away from these things right here. So, yeah, with mine, I really want to say intentional conversation.
Let me ask a couple questions.
Shoot, man, go ahead.
You talked about the reading.
Yes.
Have you always been an avid reader, or is that something that you picked up along the way?
I've always been curious. I want to say yes. I gotta say yes, because I can remember back, like, we had encyclopedias in the house, right? And I would get an encyclopedia and I would just go through and just find stuff. You know, so that wasn't so much just hardcore reading. That was just being curious. And I think my curiosity piqued the reading, because if I find something I'm interested in, I'm gonna go down that rabbit hole. I mean, that rabbit hole might be 2 books. That rabbit hole might be a series of 3 books. I'm gonna get through that rabbit hole.
Yeah.
You know. So yeah, I mean, as far back as I can remember, I've always enjoyed reading on some level. You know?
Okay. My answer is probably the opposite.
Really?
So my mom will tell you, my mom is 70. Y'all will probably hear me talk about her. I talk about my dad a lot. I talk about my mama as well. She'll tell you, as a kid, it was time to pick the summer reading books, and I would pick whatever the shortest book was. I never liked to read. I was always math. I was always science. I stayed away from history. I stayed away from English. So it's something I had to learn how to do later in life, and it's been more recently. So I was good for being interested, being curious. I hear about all these books. I was good for starting a book, but I was never able to finish one. So I think the first book I finished was, not the first, but the first, let me go read a book out of my own curiosity, pick it up, and actually start to finish, was probably the autobiography of Malcolm X. So Malcolm X is on is on the wall up there. But I think I was in college.
That's a thick book.
And it's a thick one.
It's a good one.
300 and something pages, I think. So that was what I remember being my first book. But even, that was great. It was probably 2 decades before I started to pick up reading, like, seriously. And it's not fun for me. I enjoy the learning. To me, this power thing was a personal challenge. It was a goal of mine to see if I can get through these books. It's been life-changing for me. So it's self-improvement, self-care, that kind of goes in that same category.
The right information will change your life.